Alright guys, in this section we'll be looking at solving quadratics, and the method we're going to be using here is the quadratic formula. And as you can see up at the top, that formula is x equals negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Now just like with other quadratics, we want to make sure that the quadratic is in standard form. Of course, we also want to make sure that it is equal to 0. And that's the case for our first one here. It's equal to 0. And it's in the standard form. So now that we've got those two things taken care of, we want to identify what are we going to use for a, b, and c. A is going to be the number in front of your x squared, which in this case is 1. B is the value in front of your x, which is 4. And c is what we call the constant, the one that doesn't have the letter or variable on it, and that's going to be our 3. So what we're going to do is in that formula we're going to replace everything we see, or every a we see, with a 1, all the b's with a 4, and all the c's with a 3. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we go. X equals, negative is part of the formula. We're going to replace b with a 4 plus and minus square root of, there's my b, we're going to square that, minus 4 is part of the formula. Here's my a, and here's my c. And we're going to divide all of this by 2 times a. And a again is a 1. So at this point, all I've done is taken out all of the letters, a, b, and c, and replaced them with the appropriate values or numbers. Now we're actually going to start computing or doing some math here. So we're going to start by leaving that negative 4 alone, plus and minus the square root of something. So I need to know what is 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3. Now we can actually just put all of that in our calculator. 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3. We end up with a value of 4. And that's because 4 squared is 16. And if I multiply 4 times 1 times 3, I end up with 12. And 16 minus the 12 would end up being a 4. Down at the bottom we have 2 times 1, and 2 times 1 is 2. So here's where I'm at so far. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the square root of that 4, and if I take the square root of 4 I end up with a 2. So at this point I've got x is equal to negative 4 plus and minus 2 divided by 2. Now keep in mind we are working with a quadratic. And when we work with quadratics, we should end up with 2 solutions. And at this point, here's how I'm going to come up with those 2 solutions. We're going to take this and break it up into 2 separate equations. So here we're going to have x equals negative 4 plus 2 divided by 2. And we're going to use, or the other equation is going to be x equals negative 4 minus 2 divided by 2. So basically all I'm doing is splitting it up, one that says plus and the other says minus, which is the significance of this right here. This is how we come up with our 2 solutions. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. A negative 4 plus 2 would be a negative 2. And a negative 2 divided by 2 would give me a negative 1. Therefore, one of my solutions is negative 1. I'll come over and do the same thing. Here we have negative 4 minus 2, and a negative 4 minus 2 is a negative 6. And a negative 6 divided by 2 would give me a negative 3. Therefore, my 2 solutions to this quadratic are going to be negative 1 and negative 3. These are my 2 solutions. Alright, next example we're going to look at is 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Again, notice how the equation is equal to 0. Also notice that the quadratic is in standard form. So since we've got those 2 things taken care of, we're going to go ahead and start by identifying the a, the b, and the c. A is your leading coefficient, or the number in front of the x squared, and that's going to be a 2. B, that's going to be the coefficient in front of your x. That's a negative 5. C is our constant. That's the negative 3. So these are 3 values that I'll be using for A, B, and C. So we're going to take those numbers and we're going to plug them into our formula. So here we go. We got negative b. b is a negative 5. So we're going to plug in a negative 5 plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4. There's my a, and there's my c. All of this gets divided by 2 times a. a again is a 2. So at this point all I've done is plug in all the values for a, b, and c. Now I'm going to start doing the math here. You'll notice at the beginning here we have two negatives. A negative times a negative 5 ends up being a positive 5. Plus and minus the square root of something. Again, we can put all of this into our calculator. However, we need to be real careful about typing this in. We're squaring a negative 5, so we need to make sure that that negative 5 is in parentheses. Minus 4 times 2 times negative 3. If I enter that incorrectly, I should end up with a 49. Down at the bottom we have 2 times 2, which of course is a 4. So at this point I've got 5 plus and minus the square root of 49, all divided by 4. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of that 49, and the square root of 49 is 7. At this point, I'm going to break these two apart so I can get my two solutions, because remember, quadratics do have two solutions here. So we're going to have one that says x equals 5 plus 7 divided by 4. And we'll have another equation that says x equals 5 minus 7 divided by 4. Alright, so let's see what we end up with here. 5 plus 7. 5 plus 7 is 12. And 12 divided by 4, that ends up being a negative 3. I'm sorry, positive 3. 12 divided by 4 is positive 3. So there's one of my solutions, positive 3. Over here we're going to subtract. So we got 5 minus 7, and 5 minus 7 is a negative 2. And if I divide a negative 2 by 4, this can be reduced, and that reduces to a negative 1/2. Therefore, my other solution to this quadratic is a negative 1/2. So the two solutions to this quadratic are 3 and a negative 1/2. Alright, example number 3, we have 3x squared minus 5x is equal to a negative 2. First thing we should notice about this quadratic is that it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to take care of that problem first. All I'm going to do is start by moving my 2 to the other side. And the way we're going to do that is simply by adding 2. So this equation now becomes 3x squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. Again, it's got to be equal to 0 first before we can start using the quadratic formula. Now I'm going to go ahead and identify the a, the b, and the c. A is our leading coefficient. It's the number in front of the x squared. B is the number in front of the x, negative 5. C is our constant, that number that doesn't have a variable. That's a 2. So these are the three numbers that I'll be using in the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and plug those numbers in. We're going to start off with a negative b. b is a negative 5 plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4 a c. All of this gets divided by 2 times a. So at this point all I've done is taken out all the variables, all the letters, and replaced them with the appropriate numbers. Now we're going to start doing the math here. Again, I start off with two negatives. A negative times a negative 5 gives us a positive 5. Now I want to find out what we're going to take the square root of. What goes under the radical? So again, I can put this in my calculator. Negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2. However, again, be careful. When you're squaring a negative, you do have to have it in parentheses. So if I enter this correctly, I should end up with a 1. Down at the bottom we have 2 times 3, and of course 2 times 3 is a 6. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take the square root of 1, and and the square root of 1 is 1. So at this point I have x is equal to 5 plus and minus 1 all over 6. So at this point I'm going to break this apart so I can get my two solutions. I'm going to have one equation that says 5 plus 1 divided by 6, and I'll have another equation that says 5 minus 1 divided by 6. Alright, so let's see here. 5 plus 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. And 6 divided by 6 would be a 1. So one of my solutions is x equals 1. Let's find that other solution. This time we're subtracting. 5 minus 1. 5 minus 1 is 4. If I divide 4 by 6, I get a decimal, which I prefer fractions. All I ask is that we reduce those fractions. And 4 over 6 can be reduced to 2/3. So the other solution to this quadratic is 2/3. So my two solutions are 1 and 2/3. These are my solutions to this quadratic.